The year was 1274, and the sea between Japan and the Asian mainland was churning with ships, hundreds of them, all part of a massive fleet sent by Kublai Khan. Aboard those vessels were men from every corner of the Mongol Empire. Mongol warriors, Chinese soldiers, and Korean conscripts, all united under a single purpose: to invade Japan. Their first stop loomed ahead on the horizon, a small island called Tsushima. On that island, the local governor, Sō Sukekuni, was doing everything he could to prepare. With barely 80 samurai and a handful of retainers, he gathered what little strength he had to face the storm that was coming. They all knew the truth. They knew no help was on its way. They knew the odds were impossible. Yet, even so, they chose to stand and fight. In those days, the late 13th century, the Mongol Empire was like a living storm, an unstoppable force that swept across the world. Born from the ambitions of Genghis Khan and expanded by his descendants, it had become the largest land empire in human history. From the plains of Hungary to the mountains of China, entire kingdoms had fallen beneath its banners. By 1271, Kublai Khan, Genghis's grandson, had conquered most of China and declared the birth of the Yuan dynasty. But Kublai wasn't the kind of man who stopped once he'd achieved greatness. His ambition stretched farther. His gaze turned eastward, across the restless sea, toward a chain of islands that had kept to themselves for centuries: Japan. To most Japanese, the world beyond their shores was little more than a distant tale, something that didn't concern them. The emperor still ruled from Kyoto in name, but the real power belonged to the samurai government, the Kamakura shogunate. Their society revolved around honor, discipline, and the art of war, a strict warrior code that would later be called Bushido. Their lives were built on ritual and valor. A man's worth wasn't measured by wealth or words, but by the courage he showed in single combat. They were masters of their own islands, proud and undefeated, untouched by any foreign invader. To them, the Mongols were just rumors, grim stories whispered from distant lands. That changed in 1268, when an unexpected message arrived from Kublai Khan himself. It wasn't a friendly greeting, it was a demand. The letter gave Japan two choices: surrender and become a vassal state, or face invasion. To Kublai, it was simply how he did business. But to the samurai, it was an unbearable insult. They refused outright, sending the Mongol messengers back across the sea without a word. Silence, in this case, spoke louder than anything else. Kublai Khan wasn't the kind of ruler who took rejection lightly. His attention was tied up for a while with a campaign in southern China, but he never forgot Japan's defiance. To him, those islands represented not only wealth but also pride, a challenge that demanded a response. By the time 1274 arrived, he was finally ready to deliver it. Kublai Khan didn't do anything halfway. When he decided Japan would be his next conquest, he gathered a massive invasion force, an army of Mongol, Chinese, and Korean soldiers unlike anything the islands had ever seen. From the Korean coast, nearly 900 ships crowded the harbors, forming what must have looked like a floating city made for war. Some Japanese records from the time claimed that around 8,000 warriors were on board, though most modern historians agree that figure was probably inflated. Still, it was an army built for domination. Their first destination was Tsushima, a small, windswept island sitting between Korea and Japan. It wasn't a place of power or wealth, just a quiet, rugged outpost that happened to stand in the way. Tsushima was ruled by the Sō clan, led by an aging but steadfast deputy governor named Sō Sukekuni. He was the kind of man who embodied the samurai way, disciplined, loyal, and bound to duty until the end. On the morning of November 4th, 1274, his quiet life as a provincial warrior came to an abrupt and violent end. The lookouts on the shore were the first to see it, the sea itself disappearing beneath a horizon filled with ships. Mast after mast filled the skyline until there was no ocean left to see. The Mongol invasion fleet had arrived. For Sukekuni and his men, the sight must have been unimaginable. A force so large it seemed endless. Yet panic quickly gave way to purpose. Duty demanded that he stand his ground, even if the outcome was certain. All he had were his own retainers, 80 mounted samurai and a few loyal attendants. 80 men to stand against an army of thousands. Reason said surrender was the only sensible option. It might have spared their lives and saved the island from ruin. But for men like Sukekuni, reason didn't matter. For a samurai, there was no disgrace greater than surrender. Victory wasn't even a question. The only choice left was between dying with honor or living in shame. So they made their decision: they would fight. That night, under a moonless sky, the invaders began to land on Tsushima's shores. Sukekuni made one last, desperate attempt to reach out, a gesture of diplomacy. But before his envoy could even speak, a storm of arrows cut him down. The message from the Mongols couldn't have been clearer. They hadn't come to talk. They'd come to conquer. As his men armed themselves for the final stand, a fire broke out at the local shrine dedicated to Hachiman, the god of war. Some said that as the flames rose, white doves gathered in the smoke, an omen, a sign from the heavens. Sukekuni chose to see it that way. To him, it meant their sacrifice would not be in vain. He assembled his small band of horsemen, 80 warriors preparing not to defend the island, but to die for it. With armor laced tight and swords gleaming in the early light, they rode toward Komoda Beach and waited for dawn. When the first gray light touched the horizon, the Mongols came ashore. The battle began before the sun had even risen. What unfolded wasn't just a clash of armies. It was a collision between two completely different worlds of warfare. For the samurai, battle was deeply personal. Each warrior saw it as a stage for his courage. A proper fight began with a declaration of name and lineage, followed by a duel between equals. Their longbows were deadly tools of precision, and their skill on horseback was unmatched. Sukekuni and his 80 riders fought exactly as they had been taught, launching a rain of arrows that struck true, then charging forward with their long tachi swords drawn. But the Mongols weren't playing by the same rules. They fought not as individuals, but as a single, organized machine. Their ranks moved like one body, shields raised in tight formation as the beat of great war drums echoed across the beach. Their archers didn't duel, they rained death. Using shorter, powerful composite bows, they loosed volleys in perfect unison, filling the air so thick with arrows that the samurai couldn't even see their targets. Any samurai who rode out hoping for an honorable duel never made it far. The Mongols didn't play by those rules. A man who charged alone was instantly surrounded, cut down before he could even shout his name. Then the invaders unveiled something truly terrifying, an invention the Japanese had never seen before. They began throwing strange iron bombs called tetsuhao, or thundercrash shells. These were early gunpowder weapons, crude, yes, but devastating all the same. When they exploded, the world itself seemed to split apart. The blasts thundered through the air, filling the sky with black smoke and showers of burning metal. The noise alone was enough to send the horses into madness. Terrified animals reared and scattered, tearing through their own lines. In moments, the organized cavalry charges fell into chaos. The beach turned into a nightmare. Fire, smoke, and sound blending into something no samurai had ever faced before. Still, those 80 men didn't break. Against all reason, they fought back with a ferocity that even the Mongols hadn't expected. Once they closed in for hand-to-hand combat, their skill with the sword was nothing short of devastating. The Japanese blade was a masterpiece of craftsmanship, sharp, balanced, deadly, and in the hands of a trained samurai, it was a force of nature. Old chronicles even tell of one warrior, Tsukasada, who supposedly cut down 25 enemies on his own. Maybe that number's a legend, but it captures the spirit of the fight. Through it all, Sō Sukekuni led charge after charge, refusing to yield an inch. He became a living symbol of defiance, riding into hopeless odds again and again. They fought like men who already knew they were doomed, and maybe that's what made them so fierce. But courage alone couldn't stop the tide. For every Mongol that fell, 10 more came forward. The samurai were swallowed by sheer numbers, their skill and discipline lost beneath the crushing weight of the enemy's advance. As the day dragged on, Komoda Beach turned into a slaughterhouse. The Japanese were exhausted, outnumbered, and hemmed in on all sides. One by one, their charges broke. They were surrounded, beaten down, yet still, none of them thought to flee. Retreat wasn't an option. They would die as samurai, standing tall, blades in hand. Their final moments weren't about victory. They were about honor. When Sō Sukekuni saw that his men were nearly gone, he gathered the few who remained and prepared for one last ride. It wasn't a strategy, it was a statement. Together, they charged straight into the heart of the Mongol army, a final blaze of courage against an unstoppable force. That's where Sukekuni fell, cut down in defense of his homeland. By the time the sun set, the battle was over. All across the sand lay the bodies of the 80 samurai and their loyal retainers. Their stand was finished. For the Mongols, Tsushima was a victory, but one that had cost them dearly. With no defenders left, the invaders unleashed their wrath on the island. They burned homes, temples, and villages, and cut down anyone who couldn't escape. Tsushima, the gateway to Japan, had fallen in fire and blood. After Tsushima fell, the Mongol fleet didn't slow down. They turned their sails toward the nearby island of Iki, where another small band of samurai stood ready to defend their home. Just like the warriors on Tsushima, they fought with unbelievable courage, and just like them, they were overwhelmed. Iki fell soon after, its people suffering the same terrible fate. The Mongol war machine rolled forward, unstoppable, its sights now fixed squarely on the Japanese mainland. In the cold math of war, Tsushima had been a defeat. But in truth, it was something far greater than that. During the chaos, a few survivors managed to escape the island in a small boat, pushing through rough seas to deliver a desperate message to the shogunate on the mainland. Their warning was short and chilling. The Mongols are here. That cry of alarm, bought with the blood of brave men, gave the rest of Japan the most precious resource of all time. News of what had happened at Tsushima and Iki spread like wildfire across the country. People spoke in hushed tones of the samurai who had stood their ground against impossible odds. Sō Sukekuni and his warriors were no longer remembered as soldiers who fell. They became symbols of defiance, of what it meant to live and die with honor. Their last stand was transformed into legend. It became a rallying cry, a story that reminded the nation of what the samurai spirit truly meant, that honor was worth more than life itself. The tale of 80 warriors charging into an army of thousands inspired a country. And when the Mongol fleet finally reached Hakata Bay on the mainland, they didn't find a frightened or unprepared Japan waiting for them. They found a wall of steel and resolve. The samurai had learned from Tsushima. They knew that single combat and formal duels had no place in this new kind of war. This time, they built defenses, stone fortifications along the coast, and they struck back with cunning. Small bands of samurai launched daring night raids in tiny boats, slipping across the water under the cover of darkness to attack the great Mongol ships anchored in the bay. The fighting was fierce and relentless, but the invaders couldn't gain a solid foothold. And then nature itself joined the battle. A massive storm swept in from the sea, a typhoon so violent that it tore hundreds of ships apart and drowned thousands of soldiers. The Japanese would later give it a name, Kamikaze, the divine wind. The storm shattered the invasion. The survivors limped home, and though Kublai Khan would send a second, even larger force in 1281, that one met the same fate. By then, Japan was ready. The samurai had built towering stone walls along Hakata Bay, and when the Mongols returned, the defenders held their ground for weeks. Then, as if history itself repeated, another colossal typhoon roared in. It smashed the Mongol fleet to pieces and ended Kublai Khan's dream of conquering Japan forever. The ambition of the Mongol Empire died in that storm. In the grand sweep of history, the Battle of Tsushima might look like a small, tragic footnote, a quick and brutal loss. But that view misses its true meaning. The last stand of Sō Sukekuni and his 80 samurai wasn't about winning or losing. It was about something deeper, the unbreakable will of the human spirit when faced with the impossible. Their courage sounded the alarm that saved Japan, and their sacrifice became a legend that shaped its identity for centuries. The story of those 80 men who rode into certain death lives on as a cornerstone of the samurai soul, a reminder that some things are worth dying for. They fought a battle they could never win, but in doing so, they forged a legend that would never die.